guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at Jessino Tweets and at She Knows Arsenal. Welcome to another episode of Transfer Talk, going over the most recent Arsenal news and transfer news during this January transfer window that ends tomorrow. So make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that kind of stuff, because we are going to get into it. It's another saga, you guys. It's another saga. The Caicedo situation for me is a saga. Like, it's just, there's so many conflicting reports on it. There's so much, uncertainty around it. There's no real clarity on whether or not Brighton are actually in talks with us or we're just putting in bids for bidding's sake. It does feel like Arsenal have been heavily guided by the agents and Caicedo wanting to come to Arsenal. And so we're just kind of in a situation now where will they or won't they put in a third bid? So yesterday we did speak about a new bid going in. That new bid did go in and it was swiftly rejected. 60 million fixed fee, 65 million pounds fixed fee with 5 million pounds in add-ons. And I said it at the time that it wouldn't be enough. It's clearly not enough. Even though there's been a lot of Brighton talking heads saying that he's not for sale and they won't entertain anything, there have been reports around 75 million is what would get Brighton to the negotiation table. So it did feel a little bit like a waste of time to put in that bid knowing it was going to get rejected, especially with there being very little time left in the transfer window. And if Brighton were to let Caicedo go, they would want to bring in a replacement. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. The way I kind of envision it is Edu is sending in bids and they're sitting around kind of like, no, what is this? Just kind of not even entertaining it. And so my feelings around the whole like ambition and but it's a good amount of money. Of course, spending 70 million on a player that has less Premier League appearances than international appearances is ambitious in January. I thought the bid for Mudryk was ambitious. It was going to be almost 100 million. So I'm not about to sit here and act like that's not a lot of money. I'm not about to sit here and act like that. What I will say is that when you're dealing with clubs like Shakhtar, like Brighton, that are very serious about getting a certain amount and they're very tough negotiators, in order to get them to the negotiating table, you have to put something out there that is tantalizing for them, something that will get them to think, well, should we let this amount of money go, or potentially put ourselves in a position where we'll never get this type of money again. And I don't think Arsenal have done that. And so if Arsenal are unwilling to come to the table with more money than that, the 75 million that's actually going to get them to the negotiating table, then we are literally wasting time, and I don't know if you guys have seen this, but the report from, I think it's Fabrizio Romano, he said that there are no other talks going on for other players. This is it. So this is it, and we kind of talked about this yesterday. Like, do Arsenal have alternatives? Are they working on alternatives? I think Arsenal going after a player that is clearly in a position where the club is not really interested in selling him and throwing crazy money at it kind of shows you that there's no other options out there. And so if we don't bring in Caicedo, nobody else is coming in. That's what it looks like from here. And so Arsenal either need to give Brighton the money or just, I don't know, because right now it's just like, hello, what are we up to? So there's not really much new out there except for, again, conflicting reports around whether or not Arsenal are going to put in this third bid. This is coming from, let me get the source really. So from Kaya is saying that Real Sociedad are adamant that Martin Zubimendi will stay this window. So he was the other option that Arsenal were potentially looking at. They're confident that Zubimendi will stay, and Arsenal are still hopeful of a Caicedo deal if Brighton can bring in a replacement. So it's about getting to the point in negotiations where they will sit down at the table and speak with you, because you're putting in a bid that is within what they feel like is reasonable, and then also giving them enough time to look for a replacement. Again, we're at the end of the transfer window. The sooner the better. Arsenal are preparing to take their Moises Caicedo bid up to £75 million. Up front, 70 million with 5 million in add-ons would it would be a club record deal. That's coming from Daniel Cutts, who is the sports news editor at The Sun. And yeah, so basically we're just waiting around to see if Arsenal are going to put in the second bid or the third bid. They kind of have to at this point. They have to put in a third bid at this point. Like, otherwise it's like, why did we do all this? We knew to get them to the negotiating table, it had to be 75 million. That's the starting point. I remember seeing that when Chelsea were more heavily linked with him, was that 75 million pounds plus was where negotiations started. So coming in with anything less than that, I just feel like has been a waste of time. So Arsenal do need to come in with a bigger bid, and they need to do it sooner rather than later. But if Caicedo were to come in, or, and we were somehow able to get this deal over the line, he would be our record signing. That to me just feels insane. But when you do see like people are putting in 40 million pound bids for Conor Gallagher, I think it does put into perspective that like 40 million is nothing now, and 70 million plus is probably the going rate for a decent midfielder at this point, So I think we need to get over the money part about whether or not we feel like he's worth it or not. This is just what good midfielders are going for now. Again, 40 million for players like Conor Gallagher. Like, hello, this is like a completely different game right now. So yeah, we're in a strange situation. We're waiting to see, if Arsenal put in the third bid. And Tony, it's not just the Sun that are saying that a third bid could go in. Simon Collins has said it as well. Fabrizio Romano has said it as well. So there's been several different reports about the third bid. It's not just coming from the Sun. So it's not about believing the Sun. EK says this is reminiscent of Douglas Luiz last summer, deja vu. It is. I tweeted that. I said, the lateness of it, the fact that we only really seemed super interested in bringing in a midfielder once El Neni got injured, left it late, went after a player that is really not for sale, a player that the club is counting on. It does reek, and it's also heavily driven by the agent and the player. We turn their heads and the agent is really pushing for it. And so it doesn't look good. But again, if we had come in with a 40 million pound bid for Douglas Luiz with a year left on his deal in the summer, they probably would have spoken to us. It was the fact that we came in with like 20 something million, like that wasn't worth it to them. And I feel very similarly about the Caicedo situation. Is you can turn the player's head all you want, but you still have to get the club in a situation where they feel like they cannot turn something like this down. And so you have to overpay. And Arsenal have not done it yet. They haven't really went out there and put in a bid that would get them to the table. And that's why both of our bids have been laughed off. Like, it's good money. And I think Arsenal fans also need to realize, like, Brighton are not stupid for not taking our bids. Like, we're not, they're not silly for not taking this money. They probably feel like in the summer they have a very real possibility that Chelsea and Liverpool will come back in for him, and spend more. So I don't really think we're in a place to be saying like, oh yeah, Brighton are stupid to not take the money. I think Arsenal are the ones that are desperate. Arsenal are the team in a situation where they need a midfielder. They've left it late and they want a player that is not really for sale. And so it's about Arsenal coming to the table, not Brighton. And Brighton have every right to sit there and say, actually, that's not enough. Regardless, James says Zubimendi doesn't want to leave until the summer, maybe Barca then. Uh, Visa Varuban says, we did it again, leaving it late, shaking my head. I mean, the same thing happened in the summer where Elneny got injured very late in the window. But I just feel like we're not very proactive when it comes to midfield. Like, it's just not really a priority until Elneny is not available. And so this is something that a couple of different times, like, there's a couple of different opportunities for us to look at this position and maybe, reinforce it when we're not under duress. But it feels like a blind spot for Arsenal where it's like, well, we like Elneny, he's good enough, we can wait a little bit longer and get the perfect signing at the perfect time. But we're often looking at our season like, okay, well, it hinges on whether or not our midfielders can stay fit, and they usually don't. And so it feels like they left it late, but at the same time, like, they have no choice. They have to bring in a midfielder. That's how I feel with Elneny being potentially injured for the rest of the season. Frey the Viking says Brighton is also taking a big risk, though. What if Caicedo gets pissy? What if he gets injured? Then Brighton gets nothing instead of a super inflated price. Well, the thing is they're not under any financial strain. They're buying players for peanuts and they're selling them for massive amounts of money. And their players are not on massive wages either. So Brighton are not in a position where if for some reason in the summer nobody came calling for Caicedo, that they don't have to sell him, because they'll probably just sell Matoma or sell McAllister. They have other players in their team that can garner huge fees as well. And so let's say Caicedo does get pissy and decides not to perform. First of all, he's ruining his own future, and that's not good for him, really. But Brighton just beat Liverpool without Caicedo. And I'm not going to say it was easy, but I would say that, Liverpool are a good team with good players, and Brighton not only did not miss Caicedo, but they look comfortable. It's, for me, I don't think they're under any stress level whatsoever to sell this player. And so even if he does kick up a fuss, they won't let him come to training. They'll just let him sit there and rot. He'll ruin his career, and they'll have 3 or 4 other players that they can sell for high amounts of money, and they're not under any sort of stress. So it only really matters when, like, I feel like from an Arsenal perspective, we know when players are pissy in the dressing room, we have to get rid of them because, it's Arsenal. But at Brighton, like, I don't see it being the same level of, nobody's going to really be talking about Caicedo being pissy and, all that kind of stuff. That's what happens at the bigger clubs when people want to get clicks. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like that's something that they're under any sort of stress right now. Tashima says, Jess, we need a DM unless we are happy to see Sambi play. I think the fact that Arsenal are throwing stupid money at Brighton for a player that's not for sale because Elneny is injured shows you that Arsenal also don't want to see Sambi play. And that's not rude or, trying to go in on Sambi, but I think Arsenal also know that, they know the numbers too. Like 80 something percent win percentage when Thomas Partey is there, 66% when he's not. So I think they're making, a concerted effort to try to get it done because they know what we know. Matt G says, I do find it strange that Brighton value Caicedo at 80 plus million, but only pay him 5K a week. Well, I feel like that's just the game. That's just the game. I mean, when we came in for Thomas Partey, he was being paid not very much by Atletico as well. And they were pissed that we came in and got him, and they wanted the full release clause, and they were very unwavering about it as well. We went in there with the money and took him. But, I do think that some teams don't really, if it's kind of like, as we're going to try to get away with this for as long as possible. They value the player, but not enough to give them more wages. And so that's why I still think that there's a chance that they'll give him a new deal with more money and all that kind of stuff at the end of this. But clubs will just take advantage of players for as long as possible. Like he said it himself, like he's from a disadvantaged area where there's not a lot of money. And so moving from where he moved from to Brighton was a huge step up. So they could just offer him a certain amount of money. And that's probably more than what he's ever seen before. But then Arsenal come knocking, and Arsenal can offer him 50K per week. And that all of a sudden looks really good, you know? And so I get what you're saying, but clubs will take advantage of players as long as they possibly can. Even if they do value the player kind of has to go ahead and say something like this may get him more wages at Brighton. You know what I mean? Mr. Banner says, can't stand the anticipation, been checking my phone all workday. Earth says, Brighton's new midfielder played 24 games last season and also played in the senior international team. I can see Arsenal buying Moises Caicedo before tomorrow's deadline. They got to put in a bid, and they have to put in a bid that's substantial in some respect. Like, it can't, they have to go in with the amount. What does this say? This says, some of the stuff I'm seeing being reported about the Caicedo negotiations are absolutely superb. I don't know what that means from AJ Wood, but he's more Brighton forward, you know, so that doesn't sound good to me. I'll show it to you guys. You guys can see it. Some of the stuff that I'm seeing being reported about the Caicedo negotiations are absolutely superb. I don't know what that means. That is just like so like what? But before there was no negotiations. So I do find that to be a little bit interesting that before there were no negotiations, now all of a sudden there are. Yeah, so oh my gosh, what's going to be crazy is when Chelsea are able to get Enzo Fernandez, they'll spend the money and we'll be sitting there with no midfielder. That would be pretty embarrassing. So this is like a little blurb, I think, from Fabrizio Romano. As of now, Arsenal are still actively working on Moises Caicedo. They are not involved in negotiations with any other player. We should know tonight if Arsenal will bid again or will leave the negotiations. In that case, they will do on deadline day. My word. So I've seen these reports going around as well. I have to be honest with you guys. I don't know this publication. It's an Ecuadorian outlet. And, you know, literally as soon as they're talking about something that's going on with us, they become the most reliable source ever. They were the first to report our interest in Caicedo, but I don't really think that means much. But basically they're saying that there were talks between Brighton and Arsenal today, and they are very advanced talks. And part of the purchase value is the most complex, but there are agreements and they can reach a decision very soon. And that's coming from Tela Deportes, which is, again, an Ecuadorian publication. So from my perspective, I mean, I haven't really seen anything concrete about the third bid. I saw somebody else was saying that nothing has changed. I think there was plenty goal says nothing has changed. So, you know, we'll see what happens, but that's pretty much where we are right now. This is so funny. I don't know why anyone selling I don't know why that's funny to me. But yeah, so we'll wait around and see what else is happening, but that's pretty much all the new stuff. I'll keep you guys updated just in case I see something new. Let's see. Frey, the Viking says, what's your opinion about Brighton's Yassine Ayari? Is this a replacement for Caicedo, and is stuff going on behind the scenes? My opinion on that player is that I don't think he has anything to do with Caicedo. I think their interest in Sander Berg is more the interest in connection to Moises Caicedo. And so there has to be things going on behind the scenes. I do feel like if we had put in the second bid, it was rejected earlier on today. It was rejected last night, I think. I'm trying to remember because I was asleep. I saw it went in and then I fell asleep. And then when I woke up, it was rejected. And so that second bid has been in for a while now. So had Arsenal moved on or left negotiations, I think we'd know by now. So they've got to be plotting a third bid. And so I think there are things going on behind the scenes, especially with what AJ Wood said, but I don't know what that means for us. If that means that he's impressed at how great they're negotiating and how they're just like not talking to us or what. I don't know what that means. So I hope that answers your question. Keenan says Haidara and now Burge are their targets. Yep. Score 7 says we are in for a meltdown tomorrow if we don't get anyone, and if we don't sign a midfielder by tomorrow, Edu should be sacked. Best chance in years to win the league, and Edu continues to fail. We need change. So let's take this piece by piece. We are in for a meltdown tomorrow if we don't get anyone. I agree. I think you can already sense that there's an tension and anxiety around this because, I was having this debate in a group chat earlier today where basically people were saying, that there's nothing to worry about. Edu and Arteta have gotten us this far. We're top of the league now. And so really there's nothing to be worried about. They have earned enough faith where if we get them or we don't, we should just trust the process. I don't agree at all with that in any way, shape, or form. I think you can recognize the good work that he's done. He has done very, very good work for us in terms of like rebuilding the squad, getting out Deadwood, things like that. He has played a major, major role in getting us to where we are. But also where we are is we are top of the league in January. And so as good as that is and as much progress as we've seen, it's really not anything yet. So we haven't won the league. We haven't qualified for Champions League. We haven't won a trophy with this regime. So I do think it's a little bit too far to say we shouldn't question anything that they do. And if they don't bring in Caicedo, it's for the right reasons and we should just trust them, right? Because last season we didn't make our target. And I think a lot of that was because we didn't reinforce the squad. But in terms of calling for Edu's head, if he does not bring in Caicedo, I think that would be a little bit too far, considering if we still go on to win the league, then it is what it is. I would say if he is unable to bring in Caicedo, then my question about Edu would not be about, can he bring in players that, the 20 to 40 million pound range is in his sweet spot. He can get those deals done, especially if there's a connection between Arteta and the player. Where he falls short is the big deals. The big deals are where he falls short. And so in the future, he has to be able to get those deals done. And so I think we could start questioning him about that. But to call for his head now, I feel like is a little bit too far, considering he has done so much good work. But I do kind of understand, what people are saying. I do. So let's see what else is happening. People are saying Enzo is done. I'm sure it'll get done. Boli is throwing crazy money at it. It must have been a here we go, right? Let's see. Oh, let's see. I'm looking for it. I'm sure it's here somewhere. Yeah, Chelsea fans are jumping for joy, so it must be done. Yeah. What can you say? I mean, when you throw crazy money at it, I mean, they didn't really want to sell Enzo Fernandez, but they will sell him for a certain price. Every single player has a price, you know what I mean? And so, yeah. Todd Bowley are actively working on it together with the board. Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I think we're going to see a lot of this, from Chelsea in the future, is that they're going to throw serious money at things. And that's in this market, that's how you get things done. And it would be a shame if they bring in Enzo Fernandez and we don't bring in a midfielder and we're the one who really needs it, but who knows? Tony says, could Brighton be waiting for Enzo to fall through? I don't think so. I think they're literally just not messing with us because we haven't put enough money up, Sir Rob says, if Enzo gets done tonight, tomorrow, he will be all in for Caicedo. Maybe. But I still think that they've spent so much that at this point, I don't think they could spend more, but Like, I do think there is a limit at some point. But yeah. Anik says, don't think we will get Caicedo. Tony Bloom getting support from Talksport and British media. This is their new Daniel Levy. It is interesting because I do feel like everybody is kind of banded together behind Brighton and made Arsenal look like the bad guy in all of this for going after their player and not leaving their player alone. But it doesn't have anything to do with Arsenal. It's the agent and Caicedo, and they want to leave. What nobody cares when Manchester United or Chelsea or anybody like that looks at a player and wants them. As soon as Arsenal look at a player, it's like, how dare they? And so, but it is weird. I do feel like English media has really banded behind them a lot behind the back of this. They've been very complimentary of them, which they should be. But at the same time, I'm just kind of like, but you guys said that we need to buy bigger players and, we need to be able to buy stars and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, then why would you be like offended that Arsenal are going after a young star that plays for a team in the Premier League? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, let's see. But yeah, in regards to Edu and like where I fall with that, I do think that the 20 million to 40 million pound mark is where he's really, really good. But in terms of like the bigger deals, like for Mudryk, for Caicedo, if it were to fall through for Vlahovic, like I would say he's not as good with those deals, and so we need somebody that can close big deals quickly. You have to close them quickly or else they just fall apart. And so, yep, let's see. Andy Naylor again said, it doesn't matter what Arsenal do, third bid, fourth bid, Moises Caicedo isn't going anywhere. That was 13 minutes ago. So let's see. Yeah, I don't know. The Brighton mouthpieces are all out there saying that they're doing such a good job and all that kind of stuff. So that must mean that they're not budging, So Arsenal either need to walk away or do something, at this point, it's just getting silly. Let's see if anything new is coming out. Enzo Fernandez was bought for about 10 million. And now he's going to go for 130 million. That is crazy. But that's the game now. And I know a lot of people are like kind of stuck on this and like you should only pay what players are worth and all this kind of stuff. But clubs like Chelsea, clubs like Man United are, hurting the market in a way where a good midfielder that's young, is going to cost you upwards of 100 million. So when we get to the summer, it's not going to be any different. When we go after players, they're going to cost you 80, 90 million. And so might as well get, practice now, and Stan, put your money where your mouth is, put some money on it. We need a midfielder. And I'm sure that they would come to the table if we put in 75, 80 million, let's see. James I'm just going to say James says El Neni has a knee injury out long term. Rohan says no midfielder last Jan in the summer and even January. What the hell is our board doing? Waiting until this coming summer to buy a midfielder. I don't know why it's taking so long, but it's a blind spot for this regime. They've been very comfortable with Xhaka, Partey, and El Neni, and it hasn't been good enough. It just hasn't. Our seasons break down when Thomas Partey gets injured, and it's inevitable that he's going to get injured at some point. So let's make sure our season doesn't fall apart again and bring in a midfielder that's of quality. I don't understand why we're not why it's something that just won't get done and why it's always on the back burner. Because I don't really count Vieira and Odegaard as midfielders because we know what we're talking about. We're not talking about attacking midfielders. We're talking about the guys that are going to play in the double pivot that are going to fall back and have to do a little bit of defending. It's those positions that we're not really filling. I know Xhaka plays more of an advanced role now, but he still comes back and does a lot of the defending work. And so those two positions have not been addressed, at all. And so the backups to that position. And so it's just a blind spot, and I don't know why. Like, it's like they don't want them to have any competition. It's just like, and now we're trying to bring somebody in, but it's just too late. Like, it feels too late. Aya, thank you so much for your super chat. Says the media hates Arsenal. It stems from Arsenal's success, but it has been exaggerated now by the high internet presence of Arsenal fans, and they hate it so much. Liverpool never got hate when they came up. Yeah, I don't feel like the media really want Arsenal to do well, and they seemed offended that we went after Caicedo. Like, and that's just weird to me because they didn't have the same energy for Chelsea, who put in a bid for him just a week prior, and so it's only a problem when Arsenal do it. That's just how I feel. If we had gotten Mudryk and not Chelsea, they'd be going in on us about spending 90 something million on a player that's never played in a top league and all that, but Chelsea got him. So it's like, what is Bully doing? He's so smart. Like, I don't know. It does feel like a little bit like they don't want us to do well, but in regards to Caicedo, we had every right to go after him. Like, it's not little old Brighton. Brighton can hold their own. They don't need everybody backing them up here. Let's see. Bulgarian says they're scared to death that we actually might win the league. And I think that's the key especially with midfield. They know that we've kind of addressed the back line. We don't have issues in the back line. We don't, with Trossard coming in, we've kind of addressed the front line. The midfield is where they know the breakdown will come. And the next thing that they'll say is, I don't think Arsenal can win the league because if Thomas Partey is injured, they don't have suitable backup. Sambi's not good enough. And so they know it's our Achilles heel. So getting Caicedo would mean Arsenal is like in such a good position. And that's what they don't want. And so I get that. There's 530 of you guys in here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're just kind of chit-chatting about the time that is left, which is not much. For Arsenal to bring in Caicedo. There's conflicting reports around a third bid going in or not. This proposed or suspected third bid should be around 75 million. So, we'll see. But again, the Brighton mouthpieces are all out at once. It almost feels like they are putting this out, like they're all getting the information at the same time and putting it out at the same time. And they're saying third bid, fourth bid, all that kind of stuff, it won't make a difference. And then, like I said, Aiden J. Wood said some of the stuff I'm seeing being reported about Caicedo negotiations are absolutely superb. Basically just, what I'm going to say? I'm going to say this as well, in regards to the way the media is reporting this. I said this the other day as well. The swoop in the hijack of Mykhailo Mudryk was like the biggest hijack of all time, and probably we'll probably never see a bigger one. The way that it was covered, the amount of articles that was written on it, the amount of interviews done on it, I wouldn't even be surprised if there was a like a documentary done on it, because it was such a big deal in the media. Chelsea, the club in 10th, with their mad American owner, came in the last minute and flew over to wherever they were and stole Mudryk, our number one target that was twerking for us for months, right from underneath our nose. And so the media loves the Hollywood story. Like, they love the ups and downs of the transfer window. It's very much a soap opera for them. And they make a lot of money and get a lot of clicks off of the back of it. And Arsenal are the most talked about team right now, because we're the team that is sitting top of the table and people just are constantly talking about us. And like you guys said, we have one of the biggest online fan bases. So this whole Caicedo thing, they are fixing for it to become another big story, a David versus Goliath story about how the big team in first place could not overrun the small little man Brighton that are doing football the right way and all this kind of stuff. And so I guarantee that's what's going to be written if we don't get it done. Nobody's going that's, I can tell that that's what they're gearing up for, because all of their journalists and stuff are continuously putting this stuff out here about how we won't be bullied, and look how good we are, and we have all these players that we're buying for this, and look how much we sell them for that. And I can just see it the way that it's happening on deadline day. Arsenal not being able to get it over the line, and Caicedo is still a Brighton player. It's coming. It's so obvious. Don One says Arsenal are always the most talked about thing, whether we are top or bottom. Viola says the only way to shut down the agenda against Arsenal is to win the league. I don't even think it'll go with that, because even if we win the league, then it's because all these teams weren't good enough and they'll be good this season, so Arsenal don't have a chance. I bet you even if we win the league, people won't even have us in their top four for next season. I'm telling you, like, that's how it goes. Seawalder says we still might end up winning the Mudryk saga if he doesn't turn out to be world class. I hate to break it to you, but he will be. He will be. He looks really, really good. Clippa says, I'm tired. We just need to give them the money because we won't get him otherwise. Simple. We need a midfielder. It's so blatant. It's really blatant, and it's so obvious. But at the same time, we put all our eggs into the Caicedo basket. And I do feel like this might sound terrible, but like I do feel like Edu gets really drawn in by agents, and agents give him a false sense of like enthusiasm around the deal. I felt the same way about Rafinha, that he was encouraged by Deco, and there was no chance he was going to come to us. He was encouraged by somebody in Vlahovic's camp to put in the bid for him, even though he was never coming to us. Encouraged by Mudryk and his agent to chase them, even though they went somewhere else. And he's been encouraged by Caicedo's agents as well to go and do this. And none of those players we ended up with, and so that's why, as much as I want to believe that Arsenal can get this done, I do think that this is going to fall in the same category as those ones where we were encouraged by agents. Oh, and Douglas Luiz as well. Encouraged by agents, but we didn't end up with the player because we were being used for some reason. And there's just no chance of us getting this player if we're not willing to spend stupid money. And 70 million is not enough. Aya, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, just what do you think about the surprise weird Cancelo move? You think there's a correlation between that and Porro not going to Spurs yet? I think it's more, of a coincidence than anything. In regards to the Cancelo move in general, I think there was already whispers out there that he was unhappy, especially like with his playing time, and he just hasn't looked the same this season. And so I'm not really surprised that he wanted to go mid-season on a loan to Bayern. Is something that I'm just like, they probably just had to get him out. He was probably not a good voice in the dressing room. And so in a City team that's kind of struggling a little bit already, not really struggling, but they're not at their tip-top best, you probably don't want anybody in the locker room that's going to be disruptive in any way. We've seen that even with Arsenal, like with Aubameyang, like mid-season, no matter how good the player is, you get rid of them. And so I would say, because there's a lot of Arsenal fans that were like, oh, that's good, they're weakening their team and that's going to be an advantage to us. I think it's an advantage to them to get anybody out of their dressing room that is not on the same page as them. So I don't see this as any sort of advantage for Arsenal, especially with Rico Lewis being as good as he is. If you've seen him play, they don't really need him, Cancelo, right now, to be honest. And in regards of if it's linked to the Spurs move, I don't think so, because the Man City kind of talking heads have said, even though Cancelo is leaving, they're not bringing anybody in. So I don't think it's connected. But it is funny that the Porro deal kind of fell apart, even though I do feel like it still might go through in the end. Anik says, spot on, Jess. They will say City and Liverpool have been crap all season. If we capitalize exactly, like, it doesn't matter. They're never, even when we were good, they still talk shit. Like, Jay says, I see Man United trying to go for Tielemans. I mean, that would just send the entire fan base into complete capitulation. I mean, we need a midfielder so badly, and like we need to get one through the door. We've had tons of time to try to do this, and for Chelsea and Man United to get midfielders, I think would just be like, wow, really? Let's see. Important question in case we don't get Caicedo. What do we say about ending loans for Miguel Aziz and Maitland-Niles? I would say that doesn't help us. I know that it's like, well, let's just bring players back, but the reality is that Maitland-Niles is not a very good midfielder, and that's why he's not at Arsenal. He wants to play midfield, but he's not good enough to play midfield for Arsenal. And Miguel Aziz struggled on his loan, so I'm not sure somebody who struggled on their loan. And I think, he just went somewhere else, if I'm not mistaken, that we want to bring back somebody that was struggling on their loan to help us with the title charge, because the reality of why the player needs to be good is because once we get to the end of the season and every game is like a cup final, and if we're still in the title race in the last 10 games of the season, every single game is going to feel like we're playing peak Real Madrid in the Champions League final, no matter who it is, away from home. That's just how it's going to be. And so the player has to be somebody that can stand up in a very difficult moment. And so I don't think that Maitland-Niles or Miguel Aziz actually have that. So yeah. I don't think that they're the answer. I think Arsenal need to buy a midfielder. New Life says, "Hey Jess, love your channel representing the girly Gooners. Come on, you Gunners, Katie. Thank you so much for joining the stream. I really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, and like the video. That was a really nice message. I love it. Thank you. Let's see. Saksham says Vieira needs a gold gym membership. Fair enough. Keenan says Tielemans and Caicedo, and we can win both Europe and the Prem. We just need to pay the money. We can recoup the extra money immediately. We seem very apprehensive about spending the money that it would require to bring in the player, especially when I don't know if they're so afraid to spend over what they spent for Pepe for some reason, but we get to that point and it's like, oh, I'm not sure. But we know it's going to take probably about 80 million to bring in Caicedo. So just do it. I know it sounds easy because it's not my money, but like at this point you have no other options. We need a midfielder because Elneny's out for the rest of the season potentially. And this is our best opportunity to win the league in 18 years. So for me, I just feel like it's a no-brainer, but it seems like either Brighton really are not interested in dealing with us, or we really don't want to spend the money. And if it's 5 more million, is that not worth it? Like, I don't know. And give Arteta what he needs. Like, that's another thing, is like Arteta for 2 seasons running has done wonders with a group of players that are good, but are definitely not as good as what he was making them. So this season, I still feel like he is getting the absolute most out of the group that he has, and he's led us into an unprecedented position and deserves a backup midfielder or another midfield option, so that I'm sure when he goes home, he screams into his pillow every time Thomas Partey gets a knock. He has to, because his every season derails off of the back of this man's injuries. You know what I mean? And so give him something. True Gunners TV says, "Evening, Jess. Time is ticking. We need to get this deal done ASAP. Shocked about Cancelo leaving City. Definitely didn't see that coming, and that will weaken them significantly." I don't think it will, to be honest. I think getting maybe a bad apple out of the dressing room will actually help them, like it did when we got rid of Aubameyang. So Don One says Arsenal buy Caicedo, we win the league, just get it done. James says 70 to 80 million is the norm for the winter window. I mean, this is going to be the new market now. And so the days of being able to bring in really good midfielders for 20, 30 million are going to be so difficult now, because players that have 10 appearances, 20 appearances, that have very little to their name are going for 100 million. And so, I mean, we're not going to be able to get around it. Tracy Morgan's Belly says a bit hyperbolic. I mean, maybe, but I still think people just have a hard time hearing things that are not innately positive about Arsenal because we're sitting in first. I felt that over the last couple of months, that if you have any sort of criticism, if you're not 100% sure that we're making the right decisions, it's met with, how could you, criticize the club? They have us in first. They have us in first in January. just like they had us in 4th last season, and we did not get it over the line. And so I think it's okay to be a little bit worried that if we don't bring in a midfielder, that leaves us incredibly short in a position that usually hurts us in the business end of the season. It's not hyperbolic. It's literally just what's happened. Like, it's why people desperately want midfielders to come in. I don't think Arsenal fans are being spoiled. You know, I don't think midfielders are being spoiled, or Arsenal fans are being spoiled. Um, it's weird. But yeah, there's 530 of you guys in here. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. But you guys know what I mean. Like, if everybody is freaking out and there's a certain level of like panic or anxiety around something from a lot of Arsenal fans, and some are always panicking and some are a little bit more calm. But if everybody kind of has like the same feeling, there's a reason for it. And so I don't know. I do feel like it's just, come on. Seksham says best feasible option was Zubimendi, but we can't convince him to join. Exactly. I still think you can convince players to join. You just have to offer them enough money to leave. And we don't really do that. We kind of are more like, well, you have to be jumping off a cliff to come join us. You know what I mean? Or we don't want you. And I think had we offered him a significant amount of wages, which may not have, it doesn't have to be like 200 grand a week. He probably would have left. You know what I mean? So, but again, it's one of those things where, Arsenal want to do things the right way, but we miss out on things because of it. Let's see if there's anything new. I just don't think this deal is going to get done, you guys. I'm getting very Douglas Luiz kind of feelings from this. I mean, Arsenal need to put in a bid like now. The deadline is tomorrow. So, it's not a release clause where you can just show up, with a bag of cash. Like, you have to get it done. And so, yeah, this is just wild that we haven't heard anything new from today, because that bid was rejected last night. That makes me really worried that Arsenal are just kind of not sitting there, but kind of just like struggling a little bit to figure out what they're going to do. The fact that Arsenal are contemplating a third bid for Moises Caicedo going into the final day of the window means they have to get him or at least offer 80 to 100 million. Putting all your energy into one player like this is very risky. That's Jason Sutar. That's just his opinion. Let's see. Ornstein says Brighton don't really want to keep negotiating with Arsenal for Caicedo. They've made it clear to Arsenal that their stance is not going to change, but Arsenal's interest remains because they feel that they have to get a top midfielder during the January transfer window. It's bad. That's not really a good quote. Brighton really don't want to keep negotiating with Arsenal for Caicedo. That means we're trying to force it, and they're not really open to selling him. And so we're trying, but there's nothing really going on. Let's see who this is. Football journalist for transfers.com, formerly BBC News. I don't know who this person is. Fraser Fletcher. I don't know. Says 75 million pound bid from Arsenal now expected for Moises Caicedo. Arsenal having one last throw of the dice to bring Brighton midfielder who has publicly stated his desire to move. This is wild, unfortunately. Like, I don't know. I don't see this happening. I really don't. Does anybody think this is going to happen? Like, realistically, does anybody have like blind faith that this is getting done? Or are you feeling kind of like me where it's like, probably not. Let's see. Bendover says, just like the Mudryk situation, just pay the damn money. Nobody cares about the money once we win the Prem. Social Joins says Edu can close hard deals, and he is slow. This DM backup has been an issue since the summer. It's poor management, and someone needs to be fired for poor performance. Philip says no. Jay says no faith, especially after Mudryk. Dr. Omizia says, I doubt it'll get done at this rate. Keenan says, this feels like Douglas Luiz 2.0. Hold on to your butts, people. Tony says, I have blind faith in Edu's barbecue. Yeah, I think we're all kind of feeling the same. Bulgarian says, don't think so. I mean, that from Ornstein for me was very rough, like very rough. Like, I think Arsenal are still focusing on getting Caicedo or somebody of that caliber. I don't think that they've given up at this point in time. Brighton's stance is that they are wasting their time, and of course, these things can change quickly. They're over here like, why do they keep putting in bids? We don't want to deal with them. It's just, I mean, I don't know, man. It feels crazy to me that we're still doing this, even though, and I know people will be like, well, we tried and it was an obscene amount of money, but we have known about midfield for a while. We've known about midfield for a while, even with Elneny being there. And so the fact that we only act when Elneny gets injured, I feel like is the problem more than anything. It's just more about the lack of going quickly. You know what I mean? And doing things ahead of time. So, this is what it says from Duncan Castle's 130 million euros offer compensates Benfica for the payment by installments. Argentina midfielder missed training today as he pressed Lisbon club to reach a compromise in the deal. So, I mean, Chelsea are sitting in 10th or 8th or wherever they are, and they are putting in massive, massive bids for players. And Benfica did not want to sell, but they got them to the table because, they were willing to put in a big enough bid. And that's what Arsenal just don't do. We don't have that same type of owner that is going to, vote out. Brandon, if you're in here, I sent you the link. Social Join says, get Bamba. I hope he elevates on the EPL adrenaline. I have faith in that boy. Not even looking at him, I don't think. I feel like it's going to get super toxic very quickly. Like, I can just feel it because we need a midfielder and it just doesn't feel like it's going to get done. And it feels like we're missing a trick. We're willing to spend 60 something million. Like, find someone. Is it that hard? Let's see. Dylan says Edu is incompetent, so I'm not surprised. Don One says Chelsea and their sports washing. Confunso says Brighton and Chelsea and Keys. Ian says, I think Brighton want Arsenal to bid that top mark for Caicedo. The issue is that Arsenal know they are already bidding times 1.5 for Caicedo, so Arsenal are not willing to meet that mark. Plan B for ours. There is no plan B. This is it. Earth says, I really do think the deal will go through. Brighton have now very good new midfielder and selling Moises Caicedo for the expected 75 million plus 5 million in add-ons will be successful, in my opinion. Oh no. Brandon's here. Let's see what he has to say about the whole situation. Brandon, 24 hours later, or 24 hours later, from the last time we spoke, how are you feeling now about this whole Caicedo situation?
It's amazing how quickly things can change in football, Jess, and my opinion has drastically changed in the last 24 hours. You'll have to excuse me, by the way. I've only just finished work, so I'm absolutely filthy. Yeah, my opinion's changed on whether this deal is going to get done or not. I said yesterday that I thought it would. I'm not so sure now. The fact that we're trying to line up a third bid kind of gives me red flags, because it's clear to see that Brighton don't want to sell the player. And as it is, I think we're already overpaying for him. And we're reaching that point now where we're just paying silly money if we was to get this deal over the line. But it screams out again that Arsenal don't have an alternative target lined up. So if this deal doesn't happen, I don't see us getting anyone else in. And I'd rather I'd rather us get someone in. Midfield should be a priority, and this is what annoys me more than anything else about the way the club have handled this, because obviously we started out the January transfer window going for Mudryk, which is a position that needed strengthening, of course, but not drastically needed, strengthening. Midfield, as you've already said, has been a priority for us for 2-3 years, and we still have failed to address it. So leaving it this late in the January transfer window to try and address that, I just think that's really poor by Arsenal. Really, really poor. And ultimately now we're going to end up either paying the price. We're going to pay the price one way or the other, Jess, because either we pay 80-90 million pound for a player that, could potentially be good in the future, like even better than what he has been. But again, as I said yesterday, we're paying for potential. Or we're going to pay in terms of, if Thomas Partey gets injured, we may well fall off and not win the Premier League. So, yeah, it's one of them again. It looked like we was, doing good business after we'd finally got ourselves over the Mudryk deal. Bringing in Trossard, I think, was a very shrewd move by Arsenal, especially for the price. But we failed to do anything since, really. Obviously we brought in that centre back, but again, he's another one who's not really here for now. He's one for the future, and we need somebody now. So please, Arsenal, just if you can't get this deal over the line, stop bidding. Just identify another target, and as Jess already said, and we said yesterday, as long as it's better than Sambi Lokonga, please. This is the fine margins that it's going to be between whether we win this Premier League or not. Because yes, we can sit here and say, we win at the weekend against Everton, we're 8 points clear, and it's a nice gap to have, but 8 points is not a massive gap, especially when you've got a juggernaut of a team like Manchester City trying to catch you. Shocked about Cancelo, though. I didn't see that one coming, Jess.
I mean, they were saying he wanted to leave. I just didn't think anything like this would happen, a loan move to Bayern Munich. So, I mean, I don't know. I feel nothing about it, just a little bit, because I know some people, I know you were saying that, you think it's weakening their squad. I think talent-wise it weakens them a little bit, but we all know getting somebody, if somebody's in there, I think the only way that Pep is getting rid of him in January, the way that he's doing it, is if he was disrupting the dressing room. So I feel like maybe they were just cut your losses, get out of here, So we'll see whether or not it hurts them or not, but that was kind of a shock. Yeah. It was a shock, Yeah. It was for sure. Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Paul says the only good thing is Caicedo wants to go to Arsenal. I've seen many a player wanting to come to Arsenal, but it doesn't get done because Arsenal won't offer. And people say that's what I love about Arsenal. We don't overpay. But I would say that if we don't overpay, but we're winning things, I would say, yeah, that's what I want. But we don't overpay and we haven't really won anything yet. So for me, it's not really a flex, if that makes sense. If we were winning titles, but we were not spending 100 million on a midfielder, we were spending 40 or whatever, then I could see it more. And I guess I want to get your opinion on this, because there's a lot of, pushback on being critical about what Arsenal are doing right now in January because of where we sit in the league. Do you think that that's fair, that we should be reluctant to be critical of what the club is doing because of where we sit in the league? Or should we hold back a little bit maybe of that praise until we've done something, if that makes sense?
We should definitely hold back some of that praise, just because if anything's to go by, just look at last season. You've already mentioned it yourself once. We were sat fourth, 4 points clear, 4 games to go, and we ended up finishing 5th. So yes, of course, praise the club for getting us into this position, especially the manager more than anybody else. And yeah, you can praise Edu as well, because obviously, you know, they've identified the targets, and the players that they've brought in are the players that are doing it for us right now. But we need this extra push to get us over the line. You know, we're still talking about it now, and we have been for the last couple of years. We are one Thomas Partey injury, major injury away from just becoming a top 4 club again. And it's no good, you know, and it's the only way to improve is to be critical. You know, you have to criticize somewhere along the line. You don't have to be overly critical, but I think there's always things that you can improve on. Definitely. Mikel Arteta talks about that a lot in his press conferences as well. He's always talking about making improvements, you know, even when we're slapping teams up like 4-5-0 and winning consistently. He's always talking about there's things we could do better. And as Arsenal fans, we should be sitting here and thinking, yeah, he's right. There are things we can do better, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. Because over recent years, our transfer policy has been a joke. And it's only now that we are, you know, starting to see the fruits of the labour that they've put in. But it can't be a case of, well, you know, we're top of the league, we're 8 points clear, so we'll stop now. It needs to continue to happen. And unfortunately, all this talk about Arsenal, you know, don't overspend, we're entering into a market now where we're going to be playing Champions League football. Hopefully, we'll continue to compete for things as well. And unfortunately, now the only way to improve this team is to buy players that cost a lot of money. So, you know, we're entering into that market now where we're going to have to spend a lot of money in order to improve this team. And whether Caicedo is worth the money that, you know, we're throwing about or not, it's irrelevant right now. You know, at the end of the day, we made good points yesterday. It's not just a case of, you know, helping us now, but he can also be the future replacement for Thomas Partey as well. So the club are looking at, you know, improving for the short term, the medium term, and the long term, which is the right way to go about things. But, you know, we either need to get this deal over the line and get it done ASAP, or move on and bring in another target. But it doesn't look to me like Arsenal have got another target, and it really worries me, Jess, because we spent 15 days of the January window chasing Mudryk just for him to end up somewhere else.
For him to end up at Chelsea, yeah.
I mean, again, you know, we'll go back to the comments section, and you read out one of the comments there saying, you know, it's good that Caicedo only wants to come to Arsenal. So did Mudryk, and he ended up at Chelsea. So it's irrelevant, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to be willing to spend the money. I pulled a couple of these comments because I feel like this is my frustration with any time that something like missing out on a big target or getting towards the end of the transfer window and knowing that some business hasn't gotten done. It really frustrates me that we're having, I feel like, very calm and normal discussion about it, regular discourse, and it's always considered hysteria because we should just be okay. So Diallo, I love you, but, you know, saying here you go again with the hysteria has started. I don't see anything that Brandon and I are doing as hysterical. You know, hysterical, screaming, crying, raising of voices, you know, to me, that's hysterical. I feel like we're saying things that don't align with what you think. And so anything that is not innately positive is hysterical. And that's not really what it is. You think Arsenal are the team in 10th and Chelsea are at the top. It's a choice to be angry and hysterical. This is beyond ridiculous. Things can change very quickly. We were a team that nobody thought was even going to make top 4, and we're at the top now. So just thinking about right this moment, we're in January where we know that the business end of the season is really where things matter. We're first, but we're not really anything yet. We haven't clinched top 4. We haven't won the league. So speaking as if that's where we are right now and that's where we'll end up, I do feel like is a little bit presumptuous, you know. So it's kind of like some people think about what could happen that could derail us. And then other people feel like, well, let's just only talk about what could potentially go right. And I don't feel like either of those are wrong, but I don't think we're being hysterical. I think a lot of Arsenal fans feel this way. And that's why when you look online, you're looking in the chat, you're seeing people say things like, we need to get this done. The time is now and stuff like that, because we all recognize that we were literally a McRib away from having Sambi playing in midfield, and we know that that drops our winning percentage down by a significant amount. So it's not hysterical. It's not hysterical. I think it's literally just, how can you say anything bad about the club right now? We're in first, but we haven't won the league. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, the only reply that I'd have to that, to Diallo there is, let's look at this, right? Manchester City won the league with over 100. Well, it was nearly 100 points, and they even with Liverpool right on their tails, they won the league on 100 points. They still went out and signed Julian Alvarez in January. They still made it very aware before it even happened that they was going to buy Erling Haaland. It's about consistently improving your team and finding areas that can be improved. Obviously, the Haaland thing, it hasn't really drastically improved Manchester City. But, in times like this, especially with Arsenal as well, like, you got to remember as well, our players have never been in this position. None of them have won a Premier League. None of them, apart from Jesus and Zinchenko, none of them have won a Premier League. So it's new to these players as well. And when you've got a team like Man City chasing you, and they've been there, they've done it, they've won the last 4 out of 5 Premier League titles. They know exactly how to chase teams down. They've done it with Liverpool. They know exactly how to get the best out of them when it's most needed. And we can't just sit here and lay on our laurels and just think, yeah, well, we're top of the league now, we're 8 points clear. Let's just, forget about the fact that we need a midfielder and just hope and pray that, we can get through. No, that's not what big clubs do. We need to make signings.
Yeah. And Bulgarian, I get what you're saying about, like, you're worrying about something that may not even happen. But every season since Thomas Partey has been here, he's had a significant amount of time out. So, like, I feel like most of our injury-prone players, Tierney, ESR, and Thomas Partey, you can almost guarantee that at some point in the season, if they're playing consistently, they will get an injury. And so, I don't know. I feel like it's a glass half full, glass half empty type of thing, where some people don't worry about anything until it happens, and then other people worry about it happening before it happens because they've seen it before. So I feel like it's just a way of thought. I really don't think you can blame anybody for being worried about not bringing in a midfielder, especially because the club is actively throwing silly money at a club that doesn't want to sell a player because El Neni is injured. I think the club is telling you that they also feel like it's important. So again, I don't really think that, like, it's wrong to think, oh, Thomas Partey might get injured, and so we need a midfielder based on the last 2 seasons,
Exactly. It's the same with everything, right? It's all about preparation. So if you go and cook a meal, for example, and you've got to cook it in half an hour, but you haven't prepped for that meal, then your meal's not going to be as good as if it was if you'd prepped beforehand and then took your time and all of that. I know it's a bit of a weird analogy, but it's all about preparation. And to sit there and fail to prepare for something that, you're right, it may not happen, but there's also a 50% chance that it could happen, that could end up costing you the Premier League title. I just think that's ridiculous. We've got to be prepared for this sort of thing and look at, like, I know Mikel Arteta will be. Mikel Arteta will be thinking, what if this happens? What if this happens? No doubt, And not only that, right? There was something else I was going to say, but I forgot now. It's gone. What was that? What did the comments say again, Jess? Maybe that'll bring it back.
Let's see. I think it's just like you're worried about something.
Yeah. So, we're forgetting as well, we're not playing one game a week. You know, this is just like the Europa League hasn't even started again yet. And as we get further and further on in that competition, Thomas Partey will be playing a lot of football. He'll be playing Europa League games. He'll be playing Premier League games. So that ups the chance of him maybe picking up a knock, picking up an injury, or getting tired and not being able to put out the same level of performance as what he is doing at the moment. So, and when you've got a backup of Sambi Lokonga, who just, look, he can't even control a midfield against Oxford. You know, it's not good enough in terms of the drop off of level, and we're relying too heavily on Thomas Partey to be there for us all season. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I think we really can't blame anybody for thinking, you know what, maybe we need to prepare just in case Thomas Partey gets an injury, because El Neni is also out for a significant amount of time. And I just feel like it's so normal. And it's not even about worrying about it. Like, once the transfer window closes, this is a very topical conversation because the window is actually open right now. And again, El Neni got injured and Thomas Partey had an injury scare. So it is very topical, especially because we're actively trying to buy a midfielder now. Once the window closes, I won't every single, show is not going to be about Thomas Partey potentially getting injured, because there will be no need to talk about it. But we're talking about it now because it's topical,
That's right. And there's still time. There's still time for Arsenal to get a midfielder in.
Yeah.
As little of time as what we've got, there's still time for Arsenal to be proactive and actively, sort out that problem. Whereas when the transfer window's shut, it'll all be about just getting behind the team. And I'll be praying 3 times a day and going to church and thinking, come on, please, Lord, like Thomas Partey, don't let him get injured, please.
No.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yo-Yo says, squeaky bum time is unforgiving. Hope Gooners are more prepared than the Gunners. Yeah. Like, once we get to the end of the season, if we're still in the title race, every single game is going to feel like a Champions League final, and so I hope we're ready for it, because every player is going to have to play for their life, and we better have our best 11. That's all I have to say. The African boy says, just a quick one. Would you sign anyone just for the sake of bringing a body in? As most of our targets are either not willing to move in January or overpriced. No, I wouldn't, because again, I know, people are, you're saying he just has to be better than Sambi. We're not saying they just have to be better than Sambi. They obviously have to have more than that, but that is like the bare minimum. They have to be better than Sambi, probably ready to play in this league. That's a really difficult, tall order, just in that better than Sambi, definitively played in this league before so that they can hit the ground running. And also available enough where we could bring them in. So they have to be not that important to their team now. And so it's a tough order. And that's why Arsenal probably should have started on it earlier. But I wouldn't just bring in anybody. Like, if they're just going to end up being a body, there's no point. But at the same time, I do feel like Arsenal should have the resources and the foresight to be able to get something like this done, because it's not like it hasn't been a problem area for 2 seasons now. So I wouldn't just bring in anybody, but I'm having a hard time even thinking about alternatives. I think that's the issue. I can't even really think of any alternatives. We've spoken about Zubimendi doesn't want to leave. We've spoken about, Onana, but that doesn't really seem like a real option. So it's literally just, it's Caicedo or bust, and that's what worries me.
Definitely. It's a shame, really, because the way Chelsea are going, throwing money around for midfielders and that, it's a shame that Kante's injured, because I would have, maybe for a short-term purpose, put in a bid for Kante and then sort of see where that went. Because obviously it's not the Kante of old. He's nowhere. He's not at the same level as what he was, when he was at Leicester and when he first joined Chelsea. But he's still good enough to, fill in for Thomas Partey and to help us in games in the short term. So, but I can't really think of anyone else, Jess, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a real difficult task that the football club have got to try and find another midfielder. And like you say, that's why I'm surprised that we didn't, look into this sooner. Why have we left it so late?
Because we only act once El Neni gets an injury. Like that's pretty much how it goes. El Neni gets an injury, and then we start to look, and it's too late by then. This is an interesting question. Oh no, this isn't it. You guys are just saying that we all lose our minds. I hear you. But was about, do we think that Sambi could step in, and do an Nketiah type of situation if called on? I wonder about that just because he's been maybe unfairly treated in some ways online. I've seen some really mean kind of comments about Sambi, and he kind of stormed off the pitch the other day. He was, Odegaard got into it with him on the pitch and stuff like that. But if Thomas Partey were to get injured, do you think Sambi could do an Nketiah, or do you just think no? I don't know, because there have been games where he's played all right. I just think it's the defensive part that really worries me.
Yeah, I would be really, really shocked if Sambi came in and did an Nketiah, and really shocked, because I've seen enough of him now to know that he's just not the answer for the position that we're looking at. Maybe if it was a Granit Xhaka type role, then maybe you'd say, yeah, okay, maybe Sambi would be good enough to do that role. But as you've said, his defensive side of his game is just not good enough. And I watched him against City. I've watched him against Oxford this season. I've watched him in the Europa League. And it's all about when you're on the fringes of a first team at a big club, whenever you get given an opportunity, you have to take that opportunity. Because if you don't, then you could end up either being sold, being loaned out, or just completely put on the shelf and being forgotten about. And every opportunity that's been given to Sambi this season he's just not taken it, Jess. He really hasn't. He's been here, a year and a half. And okay, he's not playing games consistently, but he trains every day with the team. Surely he must know how Mikel Arteta's team wants to play. And you just watch him against City in the FA Cup, and he didn't press. He didn't get close to any of their midfielders. He allowed them too much space. He just jockeyed up like nobody during that goal. Didn't close down any space or anything. And I don't know. I just feel like he's got a bit of talent. I don't think he's suited to the role that Thomas Partey plays, so I don't think he'd be the answer. But at the same time, I see a player that's got a bit of a bad attitude and not that same drive and willingness that Eddie Nketiah has, where he's like, yeah,
right. It's the mentality aspect of things, because even though Eddie may not have the same level of talent as Jesus, he really does make up for a lot of that with just being willing to do the job as good as possible. And so when he steps off of the pitch, you just think he gave it everything that he had, especially when he gets a run of games. My thing with Sambi is I can kind of forgive him playing with the not so good players and, stop start, not getting that much playing time. But if he were to get a run of games, would he actually put it all out there? Like, I feel like he's within himself sometimes. It's to the point where it's almost like having nobody out there. You know what I mean? And I'm just, it feels like there's nobody even out there. And so if he's gonna go out there, we need to at least know you're there. And what I liked about Sambi when he first came in was that even though he made mistakes, I knew he was out there because he was getting on the ball. And remember those first 2 games of last season? Like, he started them because Thomas Partey was injured. He played against Brentford. I think he played against Chelsea at home. I remember he had a really good game against Newcastle at home where he got on the ball and made things happen. He made mistakes, but now it's kind of like maybe he's afraid, to even make the mistakes. So now he's just disappearing on the pitch.
Yeah, it definitely, again, I'd agree with you. It looks that way. It's just, I think you're right, I think it is a mentality issue, because if you look at Eddie Nketiah as an example, like the amount of stick that guy got. You know, when we give him a new contract, 100 grand, the number 14 shirt, the iconic number 14 shirt, and there was like hordes of Arsenal fans, including myself, saying, oh, "Why are we keeping this guy? Like, he's not good enough." And even when he got his opportunities, you know, you didn't really see the fans behind him. They was more worried about what kind of a performance he was going to put in. But his mentality has carried him through, and that's why now you're seeing everyone praising him and for the job that he has done. Whereas as Sambi, you're right, he looks like he's playing within himself. He looks like he hasn't got the confidence, and he's afraid. And at Arsenal, unfortunately, you can't be afraid. You just got to go out there, do the job to the best of your abilities, and show something, because there's something in him. You know, there's definitely talent there, but he just don't show it, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah. And I do recognize that, like, you know, he had a really difficult time at the beginning of the season because he had been moved to the 8 position. Very clearly, he was moved to the 8 position and maybe told, like, you're not going to play 6 for us, but we have a spot for you in the 8 position. And now every time that he kind of has an opportunity, it's playing in the 6, in a position that the club has either not really told you with their words, maybe told them with their actions that you're not good enough to play. And so he's just kind of like there existing. But that's what makes me really worried about the run-in at the end of the season. I think those are winnable games. I think we can win them. They're big games, but I think we can win them with our best 11. If for some reason you don't have Partey, I just feel like he's going to get eaten alive, because if he's scared now, you know, he's going to be really scared. Newcastle away, Man City away, like he's going to be scared in all those instances. So that's why Arsenal definitely need to bring somebody in. Keenan, thank you so much for your super chat. Says Haidara, Kone, Lavia, Sangare, plenty of young DMs out there that are extremely talented that we can bring in for 35 million euros less. Max, what are these scouts doing? I don't know. I mean, freaking Brighton, we're looking at Haidara as a replacement for Caicedo. And I remember when, I think it was, what was his name? The guy that came in at Manchester United and went straight out, Leipzig guy, or RB Leipzig type dude. But they were also looking at him as well. And I'm just like, maybe we should go after him, you know, and just cut it out and just go for somebody. I know he is an actual DM that plays in the Bundesliga. Like, he could probably do a job. Kone, very good also from the Bundesliga. We don't really recruit from the Bundesliga, which is interesting. I don't know if we just don't like it. But yeah, there are plenty of options. I don't know why Arsenal don't go for them. I don't know why we have to go for this big option here. But it feels like they've went, we're going to go for this guy because of the agent and what the agent is saying. But it's just hard. You know, it's just sometimes I think we make it harder than what it needs to be. Kevy Kev says Haidara is very good. O'Malley says in the documentary, Edu named Partey's successor, and it's clear they feel Sambi ain't the one. Monaco wouldn't be knocking unless someone didn't want Sambi to leave. That's another part of it is, you know, Sambi has been subject of a lot of, you know, transfer speculation as well. So he may just be like on his way out as well. C. Wilder says if Partey gets injured, Arteta will start Zinni CM 100%, not Sambi. So if that were to happen, like, what would you do? You know, there's a lot of speculation around this. What would you do if Thomas Partey was out against Everton? You know, what would you do if you didn't use Sambi?
It's so difficult. I mean, that would be the only real option, I think. Zinchenko in the middle, but then it also takes away something as well from the way we play going forward, because obviously Zinchenko being the left back, he's not really a left back, or he doesn't really push wide. He drops into the midfield and creates that extra man. But if he's already in the midfield and you're playing Tierney instead, Tierney doesn't really do that. He likes to, you know, go beyond the winger and whip balls in instead. So it certainly alter the way that we play. But I suppose it wouldn't be the end of the world, because I'd be comfortable having Tierney as left back because he can defend well, he does his job well. I'd be more comfortable knowing that Zinchenko was in the midfield than Sambi, but I just don't think that should really be an option. I'm really struggling here to
because there really isn't any. I remember having this conversation with somebody like in chat that was saying we have so many internal options, and I was like, we really don't. We have theories, but the internal option is Sambi, and we know how that kind of looks. Ibis, thank you so much for your super chat. Says at this point, I don't mind going for Yen and Via. I've been waiting for this man for 10 years. All the not I would say this, like, I don't think any sagas have ever really worked out for Arsenal. I'm really struggling to think of any transfer in recent history that has went for a long period of time work out for us. Like, I don't think maybe Thomas Partey, because that was kind of like, oh, we're gonna go for him. Now we're gonna go for a war. And then we ended up with Thomas Partey. I don't know. Thomas Partey was actually, I think, a second option, because we didn't get a war.
Thomas Partey was an easier deal to get done as well because it was
a release clause.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm struggling to think of like any one of these sagas that have went our way. It usually is like we kind of get it done quickly. It's almost already done. We wait a day and then boom, the player is ours. And so the fact that it hasn't really went that way with Caicedo makes me think that we're knocking on a door that's not going to get answered. Tailwood Studio says going for a player plus not being prepared to pay the fee they value him doesn't make sense. You wouldn't go view a car for sale without being prepared to pay the price if they don't want to lower it. And I think that's just the reality is when you go to Brighton, especially mid-season for a player that they were not anticipating selling, I do think that you have to go to their asking price and just start there. And the fact that we started so low, do you think that that may have offended Brighton to the point where they're really maybe unwilling to deal with us at all? Because coming to with 60 when you know that 80 was kind of like the starting point does feel a little silly now in hindsight.
Yes, I suppose to a degree, but Brighton have also got to understand as well that yes, it's mid-season. Yes, it's a player that they don't really want to lose, but is he worth that sort of money? Not really. So it's kind of like, I suppose it's like a game of poker, really. We're valuing him internally at around 60, 65 mil. Of course, Brighton are valuing him at a lot more than that. But we don't really want to pay that asking price because that would just be like so much over our valuation. So I don't necessarily blame Arsenal for going in there with a lower bid. I don't think it's like a ridiculously low bid. But when you got so little time in the transfer window as well, you got to also weigh up like, am I better off just trying to get this deal over the line for more money than what we're maybe willing to pay and just get it done? Or am I willing to waste time putting in bids, getting it rejected, putting in another bid, and then leaving it till last minute, and then all of a sudden, we haven't got an alternative target, and that's kind of what we've done. So, yeah,
it's hard because I know when you're negotiating, you kind of start low and then kind of inch up from there, but it's difficult. Brighton are so hard to deal with, and there has been like a small report from the Times just basically saying that if Caicedo were to fall through, or we were unable to get him, that they could turn to Amadou Onana. I do find it interesting. I don't know if it has anything to do with Onana potentially being on the way out, but Everton have put in like a very big bid for Conor Gallagher. And I find them to be quite similar in the way that they play for Everton, or they would. The box to box kind of guy, winning the ball back, and so maybe they are preparing for Onana maybe being on the way out. You gotta bring in somebody. Like I can't see a situation where they wouldn't. or because they can't, not with El Neni being injured. And I did see something from Ornstein that says, from every conversation he's had in the situation, it's inconceivable for Arsenal to not strengthen with a high quality addition in this market. So I think what he's saying is it's not an option for Arsenal to come out of this window without a midfielder. That's what I'm saying. It's inconceivable that they would not come out with a high quality option. So I can kind of see that them going for Onana after, because we're not going to get we're not getting Caicedo. Like it's obvious we're not going to get him. So maybe with Everton looking to bring in Conor Gallagher, maybe we could get Onana. I'm not into Onana, I have to be honest. I think that would just be kind of like, I don't know, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on Onana? I think you said you kind of liked him, right? Or you'd be okay with it?
I think he's okay. He's better than Sambi. He's still young.
Well, that's the bare minimum requirement
It's
here.
the
Is
bare
he better
minimum
than Sammy?
requirement.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the bare minimum requirement. I wouldn't be jumping out of my seat if we went and signed him, but I'd also feel more comfortable, knowing that he could probably do a decent job for us in midfield. Better than Sambi anyway. So it's a strange one, Jess. It really, really is, because it's inconceivable that Arsenal could come out of this without a midfielder. But if we go off of what happened last January, it is conceivable that it could happen. So I don't know. Is there any other alternative targets?
That
I mean,
just
I'm
feels
scratching my
like
head.
the most obvious one to go for, because he clearly kind of wanted to
Well,
leave as well. They put a price tag of 50 million on him, so we know what, go in there,
yeah,
overpay like hell for him, and just kind of move on from it, because Arsenal need a freaking midfielder so badly. But we'll see what happens. But you guys, we're going to go ahead and get out of here now. We've been on for about an hour and a half, and it's time to go eat dinner and do regular things. So make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel. Of course, I'll be live at some point tomorrow to kind of cover deadline day. Hopefully we sign somebody, but I'll also be here if we don't, and you guys can melt down with me, because I'm sure some of you guys in here now that are like, we're going to do it, why are you panicking? You'll come to the dark side. I know you will. Brandon, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I will talk to you soon. All right. Bye, guys. I will talk to you soon. I love you guys so much. No matter how, we have different views and different, ways of thinking about things. You guys know I love you guys to death. And this channel is nothing without you. So no love lost. I love you guys to death. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, y'all.